Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Notes 29, the Renaissance. This will be part two. Where we left off, we were talking about sort of this rebirth of classical learning from ancient Greece, ancient Rome, coming from the Islamic Empire, the Byzantine Empire, Hebrew scholars, Indian Empire knowledge, all kinds of ideas flowing into Western Europe, thanks in part to the trade routes having been opened in the Crusades. And we were going to talk just a little bit about some of the things that now start to emerge from this thinking, from these new ideas. You're going to see people doing things that just have never been done before, writing in ways that have never been written before, coming up with ideas that have never been expressed before, at least in writing. And one of those guys, his name is Niccolo Machiavelli. He's going to put together a book. It's called The Prince. It's essentially a guidebook. It's also partially an audition. He's kind of like looking for a job. He lives in northern Italy. In that place, in that time period, the leaders of the Italian city-states, they were not called kings, they were called princes. So it's essentially marketed towards a leader of a of an Italian city-state. This book, The Prince, it's essentially a guide on how to gain power and how to keep it, drawing wisdom and lessons from history. His book, what's interesting about it is that he doesn't talk about morality, he doesn't talk about ethics. He only talks about results. And so, one of the main themes that he talks about for a good prince, for someone who is effective, not good like morally good, but someone who is effective, is that the ends justify the means, meaning that your end results are the only thing that matters. And whatever it takes to get there, whatever methods you have to use, do it. And it doesn't matter if it's immoral, it doesn't matter if it's unethical. This is not about God, this is not about the afterlife. It's about winning, doing whatever it takes to win. And of course, Machiavelli argues that a prince, an effective prince, should try to do good, but you should also be prepared to do evil. And so, in that context, what he's basically saying is that make friends, betray them, lie, cheat, steal if you have to. Make alliances and break them. Do whatever you have to do to maintain your power and maintain your control. And so that's sort of what he's talking about here. Do whatever it takes. There are no limits, no moral limits, no ethical limits. And one of the main sort of themes of the book here is this argument. And by the way, this book, of course, is required reading if you go to college and you study political science. And of course, I know that because I went to college and I studied political science, and this was required reading for me. And the question that we had to answer in an essay format was: is it better for a prince to be loved by his people or feared by his people? And Machiavelli argues that in the book he makes the argument that there are pluses and minuses to both sides. If your people love you, then they won't try to betray you and kill you. If the people are afraid of you, then they'll be too scared to try to betray you and kill you. But he actually argues in his book, spoiler alert, that it's better to be loved and feared if you can be, the way that a child loves and fears their father. But if you can't be both, then you should be feared. And that's generally what he argues is the best way to maintain power, through threats and through violence and through intimidation, not out of goodwill or love. But again, it's open to argument. It's what's amazing about it is that no book has ever been written like this before, talking about these kinds of issues, this kind of philosophy, and that's one of the reasons why it stands out. And his book, 500 years later, is still required reading today. Very interesting, very very interesting idea, very interesting arguments. Another woman who is kind of interesting, her name is Christine de Pizan. She makes this argument, it might seem bizarre to some of you people, maybe, or maybe people who lived 500 years ago, but she argues that if it were normal to send girls to school like the boys, and if those girls were taught the natural sciences like the boys, then they would learn just as thoroughly and understand just as much of the arts and sciences just like the boys. And so what she's arguing here about is, co-ed education, which obviously to people in this time period is mostly insane. But obviously in the 21st century, this is automatic. That boys and girls can definitely be taught side by side, and chances are someone watching this video might be a girl. might be a boy, and maybe you're learning some of the same ideas at the same time. She had that idea and she wrote it down 600 years ago, which is absolutely amazing. We're going to come back to authors and some of their works in a little bit later in the next segment, but here I just wanted to briefly talk about art and how art is going to change significantly. Art in the Middle Ages, what you have to know about it is that it mainly focused on religious themes. It was mainly religious, generally about Jesus. It was about the saints. It was about the Virgin Mary. It was about the resurrection. It was about the crucifixion. It was whatever. All right. It was also less realistic. It was flat. It was 2-dimensional. It was just like what you're looking at here is Middle Age art. And one of the problems they have here is just realism. Just it looks like these people like this guy is like 9 feet tall and that guy is 5 feet tall. Like it's just it doesn't look particularly real. And in the Renaissance, things are about to change. Now again, it lacks realism, looks flat, mainly religious. Jesus, the Holy Bible, you got the halo effect. Okay. And here's another one, Middle Age art. Look at the problems here with the realism. The table, if you were to see this in real life, what would happen to all this stuff? Yeah, it would fall right off the table because this table looks flat. It looks like it's been squished down on the page. And so, that's kind of an issue with art from the Middle Ages. In the Renaissance, it's about to change. This is a quote from a famous artist. You might have heard of him. His name is Leonardo. I'm not referring to the Ninja Turtle, but Leonardo argues that the most praiseworthy form of painting is the one that most resembles what it imitates. Leonardo is obsessed with detail and trying to make things in his art look real. And that's what a lot of Renaissance artists are going to focus on as well. There will be an increase in secular themes. That means less religious, but not entirely. Religion will still be in the picture. But now you're going to start to see more secular things, themes, pictures, scenes that aren't about religion at all. The art in the Renaissance is going to look much more realistic in every way possible. And there will also be a Greco-Roman influence in a lot of that art as well. So, you're going to see perspective. You're going to see the sort of a 3-dimensional effect where it kind of makes you feel like you're standing in the alleyway. And this is what it would look like if you were just there, standing there from that perspective. Here's another one, and again, the detail, the architecture, the weather in the background. These people back here look small. These people up here look big, not because they're giants, but because when you go further away, you look smaller. So it's creating this sort of illusion about depth, showing you from a certain perspective. Here, I know this is a picture that's on a flat piece of paper, but it creates the illusion like there's a lot of depth down this hallway. Like over here, this doorway is a lot further away than right here, even though it's just a flat piece of paper. That illusion is called depth, and it is an amazing advancement that you start to see in this Renaissance art. Another one here, and again, some of the scenes the things that are happening here, they're not religious. It's just a day in the life sometimes, Here's another one with perspective, with depth, realism, attention to detail. This was a work by Raphael. Again, it's a marriage, so this is a secular kind of a scene, where people would gather. This is something that would happen every day. Again, notice the more accurate look of the facial details, the bone structure, the jawline, the eyes, the hands. Attention to detail in the clothing. They're using accurate human models. It's just amazing what these guys are doing. Guys like Raphael, guys like Leonardo and Michelangelo. Yes, I know I'm naming the turtles. And okay, Donatello too. He was a little bit earlier, but okay, that's fine. But yeah, the works of art that emerge in here, you can see the halo effect. So there is still religious influence, but the increasing level of detail. It's like just, artists have been leveling up. That's what's essentially happening here. They're getting better and better and better. They look at what one of their peers does and says, wow, that's a cool idea. I'll bet I can do it better. And that's like basically driving and pushing them year after year after year. You hear perspective, maybe you're on your knees praying, looking up, seeing angels flying around, something like that. This is some amazing stuff that now is coming out as the art is just absolutely transforming in every way during the Renaissance. In the 1450s, the population of Europe Northern Europe specifically, is increasing. Europe is essentially now finally starting to recover from the Hundred Years' War and the Black Death. Keep in mind that stuff was going on at the same time in the background. So in the 1450s, Europe is starting to recover. Things are looking good. You got information coming in. You got trade routes opening. And whoa, look at this. 1494, war breaks out in northern Italy. And now you've got these Italian artists, these Renaissance thinkers that are going to start basically running for their lives. We're going to talk about what happens to them in the next segment. So we're going to cut it here. But thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful or informative in some way. And I hope you stick with it, and you will watch the last segment coming up next that will sort of bring this set of notes to a close. But thank you again, and I will see you next time. Take care.